In the first chapter of Yu-Gi-Oh!, a school disciplinary officer named Ushio shakes down a small boy for protection money and beats up 2 of his classmates to demonstrate the value of the service. That night, he plays a game with the boy involving a stack of bills and a knife driven through the back of the hand. He loses. The punishment is a hallucination, and the last we see of him, he is on the ground in the dark, tearing at fallen leaves and stuffing them into his clothes, screaming about money, gone in a way the story never suggests he will come back from. That's the opening of a franchise that would go on to sell trading cards to children in more than 90 countries. The gap between those two facts is the whole subject here, and the usual explanation for it is censorship. The manga was violent, the anime was for kids, so somebody sanded it down. Souls got sent to the Shadow Realm instead of being destroyed, characters stopped dying, the guns went away. That account is true and also does very little work because it treats the changes as a series of individual removals. This bit was too scary. That bit was too bloody, when what actually happened was a change of genre enforced by a change of purpose. Start with what the manga was before anyone knew what it would become. Kazuki Takahashi's series began in Weekly Shonen Jump in 1996 as an episodic horror comic about games. The premise: a bullied kid solves an Egyptian puzzle and acquires a second personality, older and colder than he is, who challenges bad people to what the series calls games of darkness. The games are improvised out of whatever's lying around: dice, a knife, a lighter, a deck of cards, a bottle. The loser receives a penalty game, and the penalty game is where the horror lives. These punishments are not injuries. They're psychological demolitions, custom-built out of the loser's own defect. A man obsessed with money spends the rest of his life seeing money that isn't there. A singer who forces people to listen to him is sealed inside his own noise. A teacher whose cruelty runs through her vanity has her face taken from her. A fraudulent psychic is buried under his own predictions. The engine is moral, and it's brutal. Whatever you built your personality on becomes the mechanism that erases you. And then there's the escaped convict. He takes Yugi and a friend hostage in a burger restaurant with a gun, and the game he's offered is played with a lighter. A game about breathing in flame. He loses. The penalty game turns his own body into the fuel. He hallucinates himself burning, and while he thrashes around, he keeps working the lighter. He catches fire for real. Yugi walks out. There is no version of that scene that airs on a Sunday morning to sell a product. Now look at what the early manga is not doing. It isn't building a card game. Duel Monsters, called Magic and Wizards at first, shows up as one game among many in a single chapter because Yugi's grandfather happens to own a rare card that Seto Kaiba wants. It's a plot device on the same shelf as the knife and the lighter. The card game took over because readers responded to it, and because a real physical product followed. Konami's card game launched in early 1999. What had been one improvised horror scenario became the permanent format of the series, and the manga's second half is a very different comic from its first, longer arcs. Formal tournaments, rulebooks, an economy of rare cards. The horror doesn't vanish from the manga when this happens. It gets folded into the card game instead. Kaiba's defeat at the end of the Death Tea arc is a card duel, and the punishment for it is that his mind is shattered and he spends months as an empty body. Pegasus loses and is killed on the page, his Millennium Eye taken out of his skull by a thief. Merrick Ishtar's origin is his father carving the pharaoh's memory into the skin of his back with a hot blade while the boy screams. And Merrick's other self answers that by killing the father and displaying what's left of him. The manga kept its original genre and simply issued it a new set of rules. The anime could not do that, and the reason has nothing to do with squeamishness. There were 2 Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime. The first, made by Toei in 1998, adapted the early horror material more or less as written. The games improvised from junk, the penalty games, the punitive tone. It ran 27 episodes and ended, and it is not the show anyone means when they say Yu-Gi-Oh! The second, the one everyone knows, began in 2000. Produced under a completely different arrangement. After the card game had become an enormous business, it skips almost the entire first half of the manga. It opens near Duelist Kingdom, with the card game already installed as the world's operating system. And it treats everything before that as backstory to be summarized in a few minutes. That structural decision determines every other change downstream. An anime built to sell cards has requirements that read like a physics of the fictional world. Every conflict has to resolve through the card game, because the card game is the product. No conflict can resolve through an object the audience cannot buy, which quietly rules out the knife, the lighter, the dice, the bottle, the entire improvisational vocabulary the manga was built from. The games in the manga are dangerous partly because they use whatever is at hand, and whatever is at hand is not for sale. Consequences also have to be reversible, and this is the change that reshapes the show's whole moral texture. A children's product runs on returning customers and a returning cast. Characters have to be available next season, so the manga's penalty games, which are terminal by design, get replaced with soul sealing. The Shadow Realm, cards holding people, minds taken and stored. The imagery is still frightening. The mechanism is retrieval. Being destroyed and being confiscated are different genres. One produces horror, the other produces a rescue plot, which is a structure with a built-in next episode. Watch how this rewrites individual moments rather than deleting them. Pegasus in the manga is killed. Bakura takes the eye, there's blood, and the body is found. In the anime, you get a shadow, a scream, a cutaway, and afterward a version of Pegasus, who is absent in a way the show declines to specify, which is what lets him show up alive later when the franchise wants him. Kaiba's mind crush is the same operation. In the manga, it wipes him out, and this series spends real time on the aftermath, on the question of whether a person reassembled from fragments is the same person. The anime's version is a defeat with an atmosphere attached. Kaiba is fine because Kaiba is a merchandising pillar with 3 dragons attached to his name. Merrick's back, interestingly, survives. The anime does show the initiation in silhouette with the screaming intact. The killing of his father does not survive in any legible form. You get darkness implication, someone else's testimony afterward. The distinction being drawn is not really between violent and non-violent. It's between violence the show can gesture at and violence the show would have to depict, and depicting is where the broadcast slot draws its line. Then there's a third filter that gets blamed for all of this, which is the English dub. The 4Kids version invented the phrase Shadow Realm as a general-purpose destination for anything unpleasant, replaced Bandit Keith's gun with a pointed finger, took blood out of frames, and rewrote deaths as disappearances. That layer is real, and it is genuinely absurd. But it's mostly an intensification of a decision the Japanese anime had already made. The Japanese duel monsters had already converted destruction into storage. The dub took an existing mechanism and applied it to everything, including scenes that didn't need it. The other change is harder to see, because it's a change to a person rather than to an event. In the manga, the spirit in the puzzle is not a hero. He's a separate entity with his own agenda, and for a long stretch Yugi doesn't know what he does or that he does anything. He acts on Yugi's behalf without permission and metes out punishments Yugi would never sanction. Part of the early horror is aimed at the protagonist's own body. Something is using it, and it is not kind. The anime resolves that ambiguity almost immediately. The Pharaoh is a protector. He's introduced as the thing that keeps Yugi safe. The two of them are collaborators rather than a host and an occupant, and the show frames his interventions as rescue from the first arc onward. You can trace that single change through everything else. A vengeful spirit administering punishments produces horror. A guardian defending his friend produces adventure. The plot beats can stay in roughly the same order, and the genre still flips, because genre lives in why a character acts, not in what happens next. None of this is a story about an edgy original getting neutered by cowards. The manga's horror survived its own transition to the card game and kept working, in the same magazine for children, for years. The material was not too strong for the audience. What it was too strong for was the job. The manga arrived at Duel Monsters. The anime started there. One is a horror comic that discovered a game inside itself and kept the temperature. The other is a program built around a product, given a horror comic's plot as raw material and told to make it work. So go back to Ushio in the dark, clawing at leaves. The anime never adapts that. But it isn't the leaves or the knife or the money that made the scene unusable. It's that Ushio doesn't come back. There's no arc where his soul is retrieved, no tournament where he returns as a rival, no version of him available for a later season. He was spent in a single chapter by a series that had no idea it would need him again. The show that replaced it could not afford to spend anyone.